Okay, on Friday we ended with adding and subtracting fractions. I think we got to 1 and 2 on this side, so I'm going to start over here. You have this sheet. If you'll find it, get it out. And what I do, you do with me because you're going to finish it after we go through a couple together. Okay, so what do I need to remember about adding and subtracting fractions is when I add and subtract fractions, my denominator has to be the same. So since these denominators are not the same, I have to make these denominators the same. So when I'm looking at this number here, I can go ahead and see my whole number right here, this 3, and I don't have anything to add it to. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that whole number over here. So I'm done with that whole number. But now I need to make these denominators the same. So this is where I'm going to use my multiplication chart. So if you'll get out your multiplication chart, this is why it's important to make this the very first thing you do on STAR, because you are going to use this to find your least common denominator. So find our numbers we're looking for is 9 and 6. What denominator can I make those? What's the least common denominator? So I'm going to find 9 and I'm going to find 6. And if you put both fingers on those and you go down, you're trying to find the least common or same number they have in common. So I have 6, 12, 18, 24. Let's go at 9. 9, 18. Oh, I already found one. So 18, and there's also an 18 here. So that's the least number that they have in common. So that's going to become my least common denominator. So I'm done with that 3 because I'm going to move my whole number 3 over here. So now 9 and 6, the least common number they have in common is 18. So that becomes my least common denominator. So now that I have those denominators, I can add them now. So let's look and find out what my numerators would be. So I'm going to look at this 9. I'm going to say, how do I get from 9 to 18? What do I need to multiply to get from 9 to 18? So I should know that 9 times 2, that's times, not plus, gives me 18. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to say 7 times 2. Well, I know that's 14. So my numerator becomes 14. So now I know that 7/9 would be the same as 14/18. All right, so now let's look at 1/6. So how do I get from 6 to 18? Because that's what I changed my denominator to. And I can use my multiplication chart and decide that 6 times 3 gives me 18. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So I know that 1 times 3 is 3. So now that I have the same numerators, I can now add my denominators. 14 plus 3 is 17. And my denominator stays the same. So now I'm going to remember that whole number. So my answer now becomes 3 17/18. And I can't simplify that. I can't reduce it. It is in the simplest form. So let's try another one. When it says red right here because when I find the answer on this side that is the same over here, that's what I'm going to color red. I need to find it, and then I'll go to my sheet and color them red. So we'll see if we can find one. So let's do number 2 right here. So I'm automatically see that I have 2 whole numbers. So if I go ahead and take care of my whole numbers, I can say 3 plus 1 is 4. So I can go ahead and get rid of those whole numbers. But I can't add my fractions yet because I have 5 and 15. And I know that 5 and 15 are not the same, so I need to make them the same. So that's when I'm going to use my handy dandy multiplication chart. 5 and 15. Uh-oh, my multiplication chart doesn't go to 15. So let's just look at the 5. 5, 10, 15. Well, if my multiplication chart did go to 15, it would start with the number 15. So I know that 5 and 15, and if I had my multiplication chart, it would start with 15. They have that same number in common because 5 can go into 15. So I'm going to use the number 15 as my common denominator. So again, let me add these real quick. My whole numbers are 4. And now I'm going to make my common denominator 15. It's hard to write with this. Okay. All right, now I want to see how does 5 turn into 15? So if I multiply 5 times 3, I know that I get 15. What I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 2 times 3 gives me 6. So that is now my numerator. 15 to 15, well, that's already the same, so I don't have to do anything. Because if I did, it'd be times 1. And then I know that 4, I don't have to do anything, or 4 times 1 would still be 4. So now I can just add those. 6 plus 4 is 10. And then my denominator stays the same. So I have 4 as my whole with 10 fifteenths. I'm not quite done because I need to reduce or simplify 10 fifteenths. So I need to think, is there a number that can go into both 10 and 15? Well, I should know that 5 can go into both 10 and 15. So if I divide by 5 on the top, I got to divide by 5 on the bottom, because what you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. What you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So that gives me 10 divided by 5 is 2. And 15 divided by 5 is 3, which leaves me with my answer of 4 wholes and a fraction of 2/3. Now when I'm subtracting fractions, it's exactly the same. So if this was a subtraction problem, it would have been 6 minus 4, so 2 fifteenths, and 3 minus 1, so it would end up being 2 and 2 fifteenths, which I couldn't simplify. So adding and subtracting is the same. The first thing you're going to do is find that common denominator, and using your multiplication chart is the easiest way to do that. So you'll see at the bottom down here you have some subtraction problems. So let's go down here and try a subtraction problem real quick. Okay, let's try this one right here that's dark blue. So I have 2, let's start with my whole numbers. I have 2 minus 1. 2 wholes minus 1 whole, well that gives me 1, so I'm going to be done with those. And then I have the numbers 8 and 40. Well again, my multiplication chart does not go to 40, but I can look at the 8 on my multiplication chart. And if I look at the 8 on my multiplication chart, I can see that I have 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. So I know that if I started with 40 on my multiplication chart way down here, they have the number 40 in common because 8 can go into 40. So my common denominator is going to be 40. Let me go ahead and subtract those again. 8 and 40. And I like ones like that because then I only have to fix one of the fractions instead of both. So my new denominator is going to be 40. And I'm subtracting this time. I don't have to change this one because it's already 40, so I'm going to go ahead and write my 19. Okay, so what I need to know is how can I get from 8 to 40? What am I going to do to get to 8 to 40? Well, if I use my multiplication chart, I should know that 8 times 5 is 40. So what I do to the bottom, I have to do the top. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to say 1 times 5 is 5. But I have a problem. When I look now, I have 5 40ths minus 19 40ths, or 5 minus 19. Well, I know that I can't do 5 minus 19. So I'm going to have to go back. So usually I could take my whole numbers and subtract them, and that works. But in this case, I'm not going to be able to do that. Oh, I didn't mean to erase all of it. Because it was smaller. So I actually need to, what did I have? 5 40ths minus 19 40ths. I need to give one of these whole numbers to my fraction here because this fraction's too small. So if I gave one of these whole numbers, so what I know about whole numbers is if I gave one of these whole numbers, I have this one whole over here. Well, one whole, and if I put it as a fraction, if I change this whole to a fraction, I know that one whole, I changed it to 40. Well, one whole, same number over the same number equals one whole. So if my denominator is 40, I know that one whole is actually going to be 40 40ths, or 40 over 40. So if I give one of these wholes down here, I'm going to end up having one whole minus one whole, which is actually 0, so I don't need either of those. So I'm going to give this one to this one. So it means is I'm going to add them together. So here I have 40 plus 5 is 45. And then my denominator stays the same. So I'm literally just taking one of the wholes and giving it to the fraction so that I can subtract. So now I have 45 minus 19. Well, if I came over here and I did 45 minus 19, I have 5 minus 9, which I can't do because the larger number has to always be on top. If you had $5, you can't give me 9. So I have to go to my neighbor. I take one from him, so he's a 3. He gives me 1. So now I'm a 15. 15 minus 9 is 6. And 3 minus 1 is 2. So now my answer, I had no wholes because 1 minus 1 is nothing. So 45 minus 19 is 26 over 40. Sadly, I'm not done because these can be simplified or reduced. Anytime they're both even, they can definitely be simplified or reduced. If the number's even, there's a number that always can go into even numbers. And that is the number 2, of course. So if I want to go ahead and let's just divide these by 2. That'll make my number smaller. So what you do to the top, you have to do to the bottom. So if I did 26 divided by 2, that's actually 13. And 40 divided by 2 is 20. And since 13 is a prime number, that means there's only one factor that goes into it, 1 and 13. I can't make this number any smaller, so I now know that this is my answer, 13/20. So it's a lot of steps, but really you were just giving to it, and you're adding and subtracting, and you have a little bit of multiplication and division all wrapped up into that problem. All right, so if you will finish working on a couple more, if you're confused, try it out, see if it's matching. I'll come check on you at 1 o'clock, and if there's anything I can help you with or clarify, we'll get it done. But try that out and see if you understand it. If not, just try it. Let me see that you tried it, and I'll come help you at 1 o'clock.